key store that we have created on a server machine using the Java default provider. Now, saving the keys is a little bit more complicated than saving just the certificates, because basically the Java default provider's key stores doesn't accept to directly to save the keys. So we have to make like a turnaround so to be able to save the keys. Now, as I said in this article, if it is a key entry, then you need to go to something called the certificate reply. But before that, you need as well to do something, step 1, which is converting the key that you want to save in the key store into a PKCS12 type file. So the PKCS12 file, you need to convert this key, which is whatever key you want to save in the key store, you have to convert it to PKCS12 file. Along with it, you need to add the certificate that is comes with this key. So for instance, in my case, I want to save the intermediate key, so I need to add also the intermediate certificate. And here is the name of the file, which is this one, the key, the file, the PKCS12 key. Then I need to give an alias for this file, an alias name for this file. And then one important issue is I need to add the certificate authority that have certified, signed and trusted this certificate. Now this is an intermediate certificate. When I signed and trusted, I used the root certificate. I used the root certificate at that time, and I gave it, and here we gave it also an alias name or a reference name for this root certificate. This is step number 1, converting the key into a PKCS12 file. One thing I need to draw your attention to is that when you give aliases names, you need to be very careful that these aliases for any certificate or any key should be completely different than any other name, alias name. Because if you use the same name, for instance, happened by mistake that you use same name for two certificates, when you want to save the new certificate, it will overwrite the previous certificate that is saved on the key store. So make sure that this does not happen unless you want to do that, is that you want to replace the old certificate with a new certificate. Okay, in that case you should use the same alias name. But if you don't want, if you want to save a new different certificate, then make sure that the aliases names should be different for each and every certificate and key. Okay, now having said that, let's start converting our first file, that is the intermediate file. But before that, let's see our entries, our list, our key store. What certificate does it have? Okay, as you can see, we have 4 certificates, 2, 3 and 4 entries in this key store that we have made in the previous video. So the first one is the name of SM key store with the owner of it, and the remainings are the certificates that we have created earlier. Okay, now let's start saving our key, our first key. This is the intermediate certificate. We need to give to the full location. Same with the key. the intermediate key. And then we should place this new PKCS12 file in somewhere. In my case, I'm placing it at the root, at the home directory, just for simplicity. And then we need to give a name, an alias name to this PKCS12 file, and then which certificate authority we have used to certify this certificate. In our case, we use the root certificate, so we need to add also its location. And finally, let's give it a nickname or an alias name. So root CA alias. Okay. Let's see if any mistakes or not. No. Okay, now we have saved this entry. The key, or pardon me, we haven't saved it yet. We just converted it. We convert the key into a PKCS12 file by this alias name. This is the name of the file, and this is the alias name of it. This file resides in the home directory, so let's see it. Exactly, this is the file, enter P12. Now comes the second step where we need to save this file into the key store. We will see what are the code required or commands required to do this process. And the command is here, and again you could see it in here. This is the command, the full command. I'm not using all the commands, I'm using only the basic ones to save the key. So these are the full commands, and I'm using only the basic ones. Okay, now this is the entire code. Let's go through it. The key tool, import key store. Now this file, the PKCS12 file, will be considered as a key store. Source key store, which is this one, this is the file. We need to also write the full location of it. In my case, I put it at the home directory. Now the destination key store, this is our key store that we have created from the beginning, which is this one. Now the source store type, of course this is the source store type, which is PKCS12 obviously, and the destination store type, this source, this key store file, it's of type PKCS12 obviously. And the store password, the store password is the password that you have entered in here. What you have entered, whatever password you have entered here, then you should put it in here. For me and for simplicity, I use the same password for all these things, just for simplicity. But in your case, whichever password for the source store pass, whichever pass you have used in here and confirm it here, you should use it in here. Now the destination store pass, also the same, I'm using the same. The source alias, this one, this is the source alias, you should write it in here. And the destination alias, remember we choose that name at that time. And the source key pass, the key pass also, it is the same as this password. Now let's see. You see here we have got something that you should not be aware of it, and I did it on purpose here. Existing entry alias, intermediate key alias exist. Overwrite it. Now obviously that we have a certificate or an entry, actually not precisely a certificate. Any entry, it could be a certificate, could be a key, but it has the same alias name. If you press now, if you want to change it, if you overwrite it, that means you want to change it with a new certificate or a new key. But if you don't want to change it, and if you want to keep that one, the intermediate key alias as it is, then you need to give this new key a different alias. Otherwise you will overwrite the previous one and it will create a problem for your key store. I hope you got my point. So here you should say no if you don't want to overwrite it. If you want to save a new, completely new key, then you should not overwrite it. No. Return to cancel import for this entry. Enter new alias name. Now you need to enter new alias name. So supposedly, let's say key new enter alias, whatever. Okay, now we have made a new entry, a new key that has a different alias, completely different alias than the intermediate key alias. Otherwise we could have overwrite it and maybe we lose one entry in our key store. Now let's check about our key store contents. Okay, you see we have now what? We have 5 entries, which means what? Which means our new key have been saved in. This is the key store. This is the key new enter alias. This is the new, this is the intermediate key that we have saved in the key store. So you need to make sure about this important point is the names of the aliases to avoid losing any certificate, to avoid any entry you overwrite it by mistake. Unless you want to overwrite it, of course that's another issue, but if you don't want to overwrite it, if you don't want to lose that entry, then you should change the name of the alias. I hope that this video have clarified the basic points of when you want to save a key store, a key into the key store. These are the basic codes, basic entries, basic details about the destination source and about the source code and the source store, and how you convert the key that you want to save into a PKCS12 file. Then you use this code to save that key into the key store. And to make sure that these aliases, whatever alias you use in your key store, should be completely different than any other alias, unless you want to overwrite one alias, specific alias, you want to overwrite it